Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
First, I'd like to make clear that what I'm about to say is 100% true. I'm not making this stuff up. I don't have any explanations and I don't believe in God. I just want to share my experiences and see if anyone has been through anything similar, and if so, I'd like to hear it. The curiosity burns me, yet the scientist in me has debunked all, even my own bizarre experiences. I put them down to imagination, but I'll let you decide. Anyway, here goes. The first thing I experienced was when I was around 3 years old, and so, have no recollection of it. The story was only told to me when I was around 9 or 10, and was presented as fact. The story goes, we'd recently moved into a new house, Mum, 2 bros and a sis, and they had all gone off to school, leaving infant me and Mum alone. Anyway, I'm upstairs doing whatever boys do at 3 and she's downstairs doing whatever mums do. So, after an hour, the story goes, I come down and ask, "Who's the lady laying on your bed, Mum?" I then go on to describe a lovely conversation that I had with some mystery woman, apparently laying on my mother's bed, and then went on to give a vague description of this nice woman. Ginger hair, walking stick. I even had a name, Jenny. So my mother goes and checks. Nothing. And rightly puts it down to the imagination of a child and ignores it. A few weeks later, after we'd started meeting neighbors and getting settled in, when she got into a conversation with a neighbor named Val. Val mentioned that her mother had lived at our house for many years and had gone off to a nursing home because of ill health. She had died in the nursing home a few weeks before we moved in. She had ginger hair and had a walking stick. Her nickname was Ginny. That was the start of Ginny. Okay. A few years later, I remember the event, but I'm not sure how old I was. I'm guessing 5 to 6. It's evening time, around 8 p.m. I'd guess, and I'm sitting playing in the living room with my mum who's watching TV. My bros and sis are upstairs, along with about 5 or 6 friends. I can hear them upstairs playing music and chatting when suddenly the music stops, followed by the heavy footsteps of my brother's friends coming down the stairs and swiftly out of the front door. My sister is crying in the background and my mum is looking annoyed at the fuss. My brothers come in the living room and are quickly quizzed by Mum, to which they both look at each other puzzled. Apparently, in front of around 8 people, a catalog had risen from the floor near my brother's bedroom door, flew across the room and hit my sister clean in the face. Everyone was in agreement to the events, even my crying sister, and from that point the house got a reputation. The house usually creaked and groaned, and as a kid I hated going for a piss at night, but apart from that nothing much happened until I was around 8. I was playing hide and seek with a friend, Steven, and my sister. We'd probably been playing for around 20 minutes when it was Sis' turn to find us. So I hide under the bed and he hides in an old wardrobe. The wardrobe had a keyhole lock and probably once had a key, but the key had been lost long ago, so the wardrobe always remained ajar. I'm under the bed waiting and my sister shouts, "Found you," to Steven, obviously hearing him in the wardrobe. I can hear him rummaging around in the wardrobe and then begin to plead with my sister to let him out. I come out from under the bed and proceed to the wardrobe. My sister is standing there clueless and the wardrobe is locked. No mistake. My sister and I panicked for a moment because he started getting really worked up, pleading us to open the door. The door suddenly creaks open and he falls out of the wardrobe, blaming us both for locking him in. My sister is now 37 and swears blind she never locked the wardrobe. I know I never. It could only be locked from the outside and there was no key. That's the truth. I have no explanation. There's lots more shit that's happened. I'm just going chronologically. This was roughly the same year, so I'm around 8 or 9. I'd been out playing whatever with a friend called Lee and we were arriving at my house. We walk in and he heads up the stairs towards my room. I glance in the living room to see an empty house, then follow him up the stairs. I just got to the top of the stairs when I hear him shout.
What the fuck was that?
Not in a scared of monsters tone but more of a fear of spiders. I turn the corner and hear him again.
You.
But it sounds more urgent this time. Suddenly, he bolts past me to the top of the staircase, apparently scared shitless. He then misses the first step, slips, and goes down the full staircase on his ass, hitting the bottom with a thump. I race down the stairs asking what's the matter just in time for him to get to his feet. He looks straight into the living room, screams, and then runs out of the front door straight into the road, narrowly avoiding being run over. His father hears this commotion from across the street and comes over asking him what had occurred. He mumbled something to his dad, then went into the house. I later knocked on Lee's door and was told,
I'm not allowed to play with you anymore.
And he never did again. From that point on, friends were wary of coming into my house. I'd just like to add, Ginny never harmed me and I never felt threatened. I thought of her as a protector and my sister would joke,
Yeah, she likes you.
apart from a book hitting my sister, nobody was harmed. People saw, experienced many things in that house and I'm just glad to share some of it. I'd just like to add, I don't believe, scientifically, that Ginny existed. I believe in physics. I believe in science. I hate religion and the popular perception of ghosts. Yet what I've seen, heard, felt, to me, had no scientific explanation. Hence, the thread. I like to learn, and applaud any explanation offered. May as well carry on where I left off. So, it's around the same year, so I'm 8 to 9 years old. My sister, 14 to 15 at the time, and I had been out babysitting for a neighbor and were returning home around 11 p.m. We were both tired but in a jovial mood. The house was empty, nothing unusual, so my sister made us some supper and we settled down in front of the TV. After a slice of toast and cup of tea, she says to me, "Okay, bedtime." So, begrudgingly but tired, I agree, and get up and make my way to the bottom of the staircase. It was then that I looked up the stairs and suddenly it just hit me. I can't really describe what it was, other than just being a feeling of absolute pure dread. It was terrifying. I was frozen to the spot and have never been so scared in my life. There was something up there, that I'm certain of. I could feel it. And no matter what happened that night, I was not going up those stairs. I remember being confused at the time by this feeling. It had suddenly just hit me like a wave and I was shaking, crying, acting like a lunatic, screaming, "There's something up there." I remember it clearly. I was freaking out. My sister eventually subdued me and I just remember waking up on the sofa the next day with my sister. This was totally out of character for me. I loved my sis, and although we'd have our differences, I'd never have put her through an ordeal like that on purpose. Nor was I easily scared. As I said before, I'd always thought of this ghost as being kind to me and had no fear of the house. It had never happened before and didn't ever happen again. Sis asked the next day what all that was about, and all I could say was, there was something evil up those stairs. Later that year we had a fire in the house. A bedside lamp had fell over and had set a duvet alight. Firemen were called at God knows what time a.m., and I stood outside in my pants with my mum and siblings watching the small blaze being tackled. The cause was never explained, though it was obvious the cause was that a lamp had set a duvet alight. Anyway, fires happen, so we'll ignore that. Anyway, in a few weeks we will go on a caravan holiday for 2 weeks. We had no idea what we were about to come home to. We arrived home and it was immediately obvious that the front main window had been smashed. We enter the home to find it a shambles. Food packets strewn around the floor, beer cans etc., talc powder, flour all over the floor. We'd been burgled. By kids by the looks of it, and it looked like they'd had a pretty good time making a mess before they left. Anyway, nothing was stolen because Mum had cleverly left some valuables with neighbors and friends, but the house was a mess. Actually, my BMX was stolen. I'd only had it around 2 weeks, so I usually forget I ever had it. A neighbor confirmed, a few nights ago they had heard the sound of breaking glass. Then hours later, it seems they returned to have an impromptu party at my house. Neighbors had heard the noise but didn't know the source until the next day. Anyway, the neighbor asks,
"Did you have somebody looking after the house for a few days?"
Apparently, the day after we left for the caravan holiday, neighbors had noticed a figure standing, looking out of the windows during the day. At night they reported seeing a silhouette through the curtains, again apparently keeping watch. We never found an explanation, and soon after we moved house. I loved that house. It will always be my true home and I'd move back there tomorrow. But I swear on my life, my kids' lives and my family's lives, and they'd agree that house was haunted. Things didn't stop there though. We moved to London, and after a year or two moving around from home to home we settled in a house in Raynes Park, near Wimbledon. It was a lovely area, full of trees and open grassland. We'd bought a dog, Bonnie the staff, and Sis and I used to take her for long walks on Wimbledon Common. So everything was good, things were looking up and the old house was forgotten about. Anyway, one night I'm laying in bed and I can hear the dog walking around my bed. I can hear and feel its footsteps as it's walking around the bed and its nails clicking on the carpet. Then, it's dived under the bed and is making a commotion. I can feel it pushing the mattress up from under me. So I say, "Oi, Bonnie, what are you doing? Come on, get up on the bed." To which there's no response. So again I call out, "Come on the bed." Still no response. So, annoyed, I throw the blanket off and get up and switch the light on. I get on my knees and look under the bed. Bonnie, she's not there. I call out, "Bonnie," and look around the room. Nothing. So I scratch my head for a second, then go downstairs to see where this damn dog is. Sure enough, she's curled up on the floor snoring like a baby. How long's Bonnie been there? I ask my mum.
She's been here all night.
That was the start of the haunting part 2. A few weeks later, I'm probably 11 or 12 at this point. I'm in my room doing whatever and decide to go for a piss. So I'm in the bathroom having a piss when I hear my brother behind me whisper through the door, "Beware of the dark." I jump out of my skin, then shout at him, "Stop messing around, I'm not scared." He'd often mess around. So I finish my piss and go looking for him, nothing. I checked that whole FN house from top to bottom expecting him to have found some new awesome hiding place that I hadn't noticed, but no. The only people at home were me, Alan, Mum's boyfriend, and Bonnie the dog. Alan confirmed my bro had left the house hours ago. The voice was unmistakable. It was my brother's voice. I'm certain. I now put it down to imagination, as I have with all of my experiences, but it was so real to me that I simply cannot be sure. Again, I have no satisfactory explanation and refuse to believe in ghosts. Sorry if the stories are boring. In all cases I'm just giving a true account of what happened and refuse to embellish any details for people's entertainment. That's not why I'm writing this. Also, if anyone has any ideas on these matters or has shared similar experiences, I'd love to hear them. Skip forward a few years. It's 1996 and I'm 15. My siblings and mum all had jobs and we'd moved into a bigger house in West Norwood, London. Sis was a qualified hairdresser working long hours and mum was running a chain of charity shops, also working long hours. Anyway, it was either a weekend or school holiday because I'd woke up at 10 or 11 a.m. and had nothing to do. Mum had gone to work but Sis had called in sick. She didn't feel right, was her explanation at the time. Anyway, the day passes as normal for me, but I can see my sis isn't well. She never looked ill really, more anxious. She was doing a lot of nail biting and saying stuff like,
I've got a bad feeling, something's wrong.
but couldn't put her finger on what it was. It was mystifying to me at the time, but I later found out why. Around 9 p.m. came, and Mum had failed to return home yet. Not unusual. Usually my sis was just returning home from work at this time, but due to this illness had spent the day pacing around looking worried. My sister was getting more anxious by the second, and was at this point almost crying, so I ask what's wrong.
Something's happened to Mum, I can feel it.
I brush it off as her being stupid. But she's adamant. I'm gonna go and look for her. So she goes out in the car looking for Mum. About an hour passes when sis returns home. Nothing. She'd tried all the friends' addresses and a local pub that my mum would visit, but nobody had seen her. Sis was looking even more worried now.
Something's happened, I can feel it.
She kept repeating. Her BF turned up and they went out again in the car, looking for Mum. About 1 a.m. comes. I hear the door close, so come out of my room to investigate. My sis is walking up the stairs. I can see her hair is a mess and their makeup is down her face. I ask, did you find her? She starts crying and tells me what had happened. At around 8 a.m. that morning, shortly after arriving at work, my mum had slipped and banged her head, leaving her unconscious. She'd spent the entire day on the floor of the closed shop, unconscious and slipping into a shock-induced coma. Another hour or two and she would have died. She spent a few days in hospital going through scans etc. before gladly making a full recovery. My sis can't explain what happened that day or how she knew that something bad was going to happen. Was it luck? Intuition? Her explanation was, I just woke up with a feeling. I have no idea. But she was right. One more that sticks in my mind. Well, two actually. One kind of a nice story, the other one isn't. It's around 2000 and I'm 19. I'd moved in with my girlfriend to Battersea, and had had a beautiful baby daughter. Mum had been diagnosed with cancer a few years before and had died approximately 2 months beforehand. I wasn't taking it well. I was crying all the time and seeking comfort in my GF and baby to take my mind off it. Anyway, they've gone off to bed and I'm alone with my thoughts. I drop my head into my lap and start quietly sobbing. I really missed Mum. I'm crying for a minute or two, trying not to make a noise, when I hear my GF walk along the passageway into the front room. She comes into the room and stands right over me, making the floor move. I could feel the heat from her legs and the sound of her clothes. I assumed that she didn't know what to say, so she just stood there. I continue crying into my lap for a moment, trying to compose myself, then I dry my eyes and look up. Nothing. There's nobody there. I look around the door expecting to see her walking away. Nope. I go into the bedroom, she's asleep. Whoever it was, it certainly wasn't the GF. I'd like to think it was Mum coming to see me, but the scientist in me won't allow it. The second story isn't so cheerful. The second story was only a fleeting glimpse but was definitely real and definitely scared me. It's probably a year or two later and my daughter is probably 3, old enough to use the toilet but still wetting the bed probably once a month or so. It's about 1 a.m. and everyone's in bed. I'm sitting on the PlayStation when I hear a noise from behind me. I assume it's either the GF or my daughter going to the toilet, so I turn around to look. If it's my daughter, I'd usually offer my assistance with her being so young, and also being prone to the odd bedwetting, and also being half asleep. So anyway, I look around to see the silhouette of a little girl in a black and white dress scurry into the bathroom. I assume it's my daughter, although I thought the clothing was a little out of place. So I offer my assistance. She doesn't reply, so I wait for a minute, expecting to hear the toilet flush. Nothing. So, curious, I got up and went to the bathroom. The light is on in there, so I knock lightly. Hey, you okay, darling? Need a hand? No response. I ask again, a little louder. Still nothing. So I open the door slightly and take a peek inside. Nothing. Nobody there. I look in my daughter's room. She's sound asleep wearing nothing but a vest and underwear. Also, she never had a dress that was even remotely similar. I saw a girl go into that bathroom, I'm positive. The door moved when she went in and the black and white dress was vivid. It was like a party dress, wide at the bottom with horizontal bands of black and white frills on the skirt. It moved and brushed against the door as she ran into the bathroom. I also remember seeing the shape of her hair, although the face was in shadow. I never told this to my then GF because she'd probably have freaked out and/or thought I was crazy. I think of myself as a rational person, but it scared the shit out of me at the time and still does. Lots more, mostly in the old house I grew up in. Little things happened so often that we'd just say, "Ah, it's Ginny again," and forget about it. We'd gotten used to it. One morning Mum came down to find tins of food stacked on the kitchen table. There'd always be the sound of footsteps in the house at night. I used to sleep in my sister's bed with her basically because we were scared to sleep alone due to doors opening, closing. Doors would open, close by themselves, or in the case of the wardrobe, lock themselves. Our pet dogs at the time would behave weird sometimes, growling at shadows or come running downstairs apparently in a rush to get away from something. Some things above were only fully explained to me at a later date due to me being the youngest. I'll try and remember more for tomorrow. This happened about 6 years ago. My father had died recently and again I was not taking this well. It had happened suddenly and I had not had a chance to say goodbye. He was my best friend and it was always me and him, partners in crime so to speak. I was a lot closer to him than I was my mum and I know I meant everything to him. He loved me completely and worshipped the ground I walked on. He was a great dad. I'd split up with the GF and had moved into a flat near Lewisham, London. I'd spend most of the days playing Oblivion on the Xbox and smoking weed to numb the pain, sleeping throughout the day and being a night owl. I didn't dream much, probably the weed, and when I did they were just a mess of meaningless crap lasting seconds. Anyway, I went to sleep one night. Then I woke up at about 5 a.m. Standing in front of me by the bed was my dad. I was shocked, then I thought, I'm still asleep here, and laughed. Then I asked him, "What are you doing here? You're dead?" In a kind of light-hearted, comical tone. He just stood there looking at me, as clear as day, looking straight at me. Not moving an inch, not blinking. It was almost like it was a cardboard cut out of him. Rigid yet real. The detail was exact. I could see his face, wrinkles, skin blemishes, eyes etc. I wasn't afraid. It was great to see him to be honest. Anyway, I look at him for a few seconds then say, "You shouldn't be here, go away." Then turn over to go back to sleep. I put it down to being some kind of freaky dream. I woke up the next day thinking that was weird, but just put it down to being a vivid dream. Evening time comes and my phone rings. It's my sister. He was not her biological father but he loved her like a daughter and they shared that bond. She always says he was the closest thing she ever had to a dad and I agree. Anyway, she continues.
I had a really weird dream last night about your dad.
She'd had the exact same dream. He was just standing by her bed, looking at her. Not saying anything. Just there. Again, I'd put this down to stress, grief, imagination, whatever, but for the detail. He was so detailed it was lifelike. I'm welling up here, but I've recalled one more I'd like to share. This is the last one. I've texted family members to try and jog my memory a bit, but this is the only one that really stands out to me, so here goes. I'm 18 at the time. Mum had been diagnosed with cancer years earlier and after several bouts of chemo and a few high points she had deteriorated. She had 6 months to live. Nurses were there on a daily basis to administer morphine. I think it was morphine, and she was bedridden. Her partner, Dave, had died around 6 to 12 months before, so she was alone. We, bros and sis, were going round every day trying to help Mum through this time, and although we never thought about it, we knew we didn't have long left with our mum. I was in total denial and didn't realize the full extent of her illness, still hoping she would make a full miraculous recovery. So, the routine was set. Nurses would come in during the day or whenever called and administer morphine. My sis would help her out with going to the toilet, getting dressed, etc., and womanly things, and me and my bros just kind of took a back seat. Helped where we could. Anyway, while on the morphine, Mum started mentioning Dave a lot. No surprise with him being her latest partner. But then things started getting weird. She would talk to him when alone in her room, something we'd put down to just her being off her face on morphine, but then she after a week or so started complaining to us when not on the morphine. She'd say things like,
I wish he'd just leave me alone now, he keeps making me jump.
My sister, who'd spent the most time with Mum at this stage, was telling us what Mum was seeing. She would see Dave walking around the house as normal, or sitting in his chair, or sitting on her bed. At first she seemed fine, but we could tell these visions of Dave were getting to her. She would shout at him to leave her alone and stop making her jump. My sis was convinced that Mum was seeing Dave, but tried to brush it off as drug-induced hallucinations. I tend to believe it was the hallucinations of a dying woman heavily sedated on morphine. That's the rational explanation, I think. But who knows? I can't be certain. Nor would I doubt Mum's ability to distinguish real from not real. That being said, I have no clue as to the effect of morphine on the brain, or what the stress of knowing she was about to die had on her. The poster above that says, if you truly loved science you wouldn't refuse to believe in anything at all. Has a point. I agree with you, Anon. If believing in God is an act of faith, then surely not believing in God is also an act of faith. That's not very scientific of me, and I concede it's narrow-mindedness on my part. Op signing off. Thanks for reading, and thanks, X, for keeping this alive. I expected nothing in return, yet writing this has had a big effect on me and I'm grateful. All I can say is that everything I've written here is fact, to the point where I'm now in tears reading it back. I've never told anyone most of this. I've told people about Ginny before as a kind of conversation piece, but I've never actually written it down or had the time to go into this much detail before. We all live busy lives now, so things like Ginny get forgotten about and laughed at. It's brought back a lot of emotions I felt at the time, and for the most part I've welcomed them. Thanks, Anons.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.